going to learn a little bit. I'm in Israel right now. I'm in Modi'in. I'll give a little background. I feel like this is one of the most key things to learn, especially in times like this. And it's Likutei Halachot. So this is the Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law, but through the lens of Likutei Maharan, which is rebbenachman's sort of magnum opus, the epic Torah of rebbenachman. And this is Reb Natan using Likutei Maharan as a guide toward understanding the Shulchan Aruch, toward understanding these different laws and customs and things that we need to do to align these mitzvot, these commandments, to align with our Creator. How do we bring on this alignment? And what is the sod? What are the secrets of this alignment and these different mitzvot, these different commandments that we're doing? I'm actually going to shift to another chair because it's super hot where I'm at right now. Hold on one second. The sun is pretty strong. Right, this is a little better. Okay, so we're going to jump into it. If you have Likutei Halachot, amazing. You can go on Safaria and write in the word Likutei Halachot or breslov Torah, and you'll find it. I'm going to jump in. Again, sending you guys love from Israel. And if anybody wants to jump in, you can send a request here, and you can join me. All right, so it starts, Yitgaber Kari, Baboker Lavodat Boro, Shiyehu Morer HaShachar. So this means that we wake up like a lion in the service of the Creator, so that it is you that awakens the dawn. Shiyehu Morer HaShachar. So in Hebrew, a lot of the times when you're translating in English, you really don't understand, or you don't really get the significance of the word or what it's related to and what it's meant to bring to mind and what it might be referencing just by it being etymologically related to some other word. So here, Hashachar, Shachar is darkness. Here we're saying that we have to positively and proactively wake up like a lion when Rabbeinu is teaching and when we're trying to understand Torah. So when we're talking about waking up, it's not only in the morning, it's also waking up from this spiritual slumber, especially in this generation. So much of us, so much of our mood or feeling is at the mercy of what we think we're feeling, instead of being proactive in telling ourselves and manifesting a feeling that we want. So when we think about Shiyehu Morer HaShachar, so it's saying that it should be you that awakens the dawn, the Shachar, the darkness. So it's saying, like a lion in the service of the Creator, in this desire to be aligned with our Creator, to be in alignment, you have to wake up the dawn. You have to wake up the Shachar. So it means you're proactive in bringing the light into the darkness. So as I mentioned, we're talking about the morning when you're waking up, but we're also talking about waking up from this spiritual slumber. What is the spiritual slumber? It's unfortunately the yeush, the sadness, the disconnect, this depression. Excuse me. I have allergies. And I ran out of medicine because I'm in Israel. Anyway, so as we mentioned, it's this disconnect. Spiritual slumber is when we're not aligned spiritually. When we get stuck and depressed, it means we're tied into this space of woe is me and of physicality and then constriction. As we know from Mitzrayim, the word is metzar, the root word. Metzar is constriction. And rebbenachman says, he expands on the verse, mina metzar karatia, from this constriction, from this narrow space, I'll call out to you. And rebbenachman says that en shum yush ba'olam klal, that there is no reason to despair at all. So this spiritual slumber and the analogy, or how we view nighttime, which is darkness, is a bechina, is an aspect of the spiritual slumber. It's a mashal, it's sort of, this is the representation, or this is how we see outside what's actually going on within us. And we have to be proactive to do the talpa, which means to flip it, to flip this state into a space and state of love and light and goodness. And this halakha is teaching us that we have to proactively do it. My first book, now we're reading Genesis again, we're reading Bereishit, so the chapter that correlates with the first chapter of Genesis in this book is called Just Keep Me Where the Light Is, which is a song, well, a lyric in a song, Gravity, by John Mayer. And really it's the space that we all desire to be in. And when we read in this chapter, let there be light and it was good, this is God in the Eser Mamarot, in the utterances where he's creating. So those 10 utterances of creation are mirrored in the Eser, in the 10 mikomot that we have, in the 10 spaces that we call the Sfirot, that the Arizal expounds on. And this is, some people call the tree of life. So there's Chochmah Bina Dat, which is up here in the Mochin, and then, so those are the 3 top Sfirot. Of course, there's Keter as well. And then there's Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, going down to Malchut, which each one represents one of the 7 shepherds. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, who's the balance, the Tiferet, moving through Moshe, Aaron, and there's Yosef, of course, and then it ends with Malchut, King David. And much of Likutei Halachot is bringing in verses from King David, Melech David, because we could read this as historical things that happened, which they did and they transpired. Sorry, it's kind of loud here. Shmuel Aleph and Shmuel Bet and Tehillim, it's also a way on the prati level to understand that these are things that are happening at all times. We all have different judgments. We're judging ourselves. Other people are judging us that are coming against us. And just like King David did the Zamra and the Itapcha, that he, instead of, as a king, killing this person or saying off with their head, he actually did the Zamra, which is the core of breslov teaching, which is I will sing, which is seeing the good point and flipping any bad into good. So it's this practice that we need to continuously do, not only when we're dealing with other people that may be trying to take us down or put us in a depressive state or in a disconnect with our emotional attributes, which we keep talking about as the spiritual slumber, is the state of disconnect, the spiritual slumber. We want to move to a space of simcha. The teshuva de le'ela, which is correlated with tefillah, can only be done with simcha, can only be done with happiness. So we need to move from a space of, it's called domem, where you don't have any speech, you're so far depressed that you can't even call out in hope, that you move to a space of dibul. Prayer is the way that we call out, the way that we elevate ourselves from animal to midaber, someone who can speak out and create through speech. Just as we were created, and creation in and of itself was created through speech, we have to mimic this and create through speech. And evil and bad speech destroys, but good speech, as you see, gives hope and brings life. Real chiyut. So this is the space that we need to be in. And when we're talking about the korbanot, the sacrifices in the Holy Temple, this is a mashal, there's a way to understand that we fell, there was a disconnect, we did something that is correlated to the space of an animal. We acted toward our animalistic nature, which is connected to the nefesh habehemit, which is the animal soul. And we're actually bringing an animal on the altar and sacrificing it. And this animal represents this animalistic nature. And when we do this sacrifice, what Rabbeinu is talking about is that we have to do this birur, we have to do this process of finding the good out of the bad that we did, because we don't want to be taken down by the bad. We don't want to think of ourselves as all bad. We never want to get into the space of being hopeless. And especially in a time like this, where it seems like such a difficult process, even more so we have to judge ourselves favorably. And the last talk we were doing on my erezsafar.com/light a couple nights ago, some powerful torah, some powerful music. We're going to be doing again tomorrow. I'm in Israel, so it's Israel time at 8 p.m., 10 a.m. I believe, in LA, where my kids are, where I cannot wait to see them, and 1 p.m. in New York. So we have to do this birur. We have to do this finding the good out of the bad. This is awakening ourselves from the spiritual slumber. Right now, this psychological warfare that's accompanying the atrocities that are actually happening, that nobody would ever wish on anybody, that's a permutation of the evil inclination. The other media that they're trying to put out there, it's too difficult to talk about it. And we're talking about speech, how powerful speech is. We don't want to even give life to the horrible things that are happening. But the idea is that these things will not take us down and put us in despair. And the Lubavich Rebbe talks about the difference between atzvut and mirirut. So atzvut is this depressive state, and as Rebbenachman teaches, rebbenachman teaches, is the shena, the spiritual slumber. But mirirut is bitterness. It's not depression, it's bitterness. Depression doesn't serve any purpose. And the Lubavitch Rebbe, Mendel Kamenson, who spoke at the Light of the Infinite Festival and has this incredible book called The Positivity Bias, that's very powerful, that even points out how far the Lubavitcher Rebbe would stay in the space of this tracht good, vizayin good, think good and it will be good, manifesting as a keli, as a vessel for goodness, love, and light. And even if somebody would say that there's a deadline, he would switch it to due date, cluing us into the importance, as we're talking about Dibul, in Bereishit right now, the world was created, God created the world through speech, through these letters, through this aleph to taf. When there is alignment, and when things are connected to the source, so that is when these letters, these 22 letters that all of creation, that Adam Rishon named and gave chiyut to, and when we got the Torah, that Elokut is embedded, that godliness is embedded in anything in creation, and the idea of brachot, of saying blessings, of elevating something that is klipa noga, that can go either way, as Melech Shlomo said, Hakol ze lumad ze, everything is this against the other. They all have the reality right now, and Bereishit, and as we read, starts with a bet, which is 2, numerical value 2. It's to clue us in that the Torah, this Torah, not the Oraita Datikastima, not the hidden ancient Torah that we will eventually receive and will eventually understand. The Torah that we got on Mount Sinai is the Torah for us. It starts with a bet. It's signifying that there's separations, that there's polarities, that there's the potential for good and bad. And it's on us to complete creation and to bring the goodness. As we read, let there be light and it was good. We have to continually be in that space of let there be light, let it be good. Or even existing in a space that Mashiach now, that we could bring this redemptive consciousness now, that if we're going into war, we have to believe that we've already won, and that is the consciousness and the vessel that will bring the success. Because where someone is, that's what they bring in. Where you are in your machshava and your thought is what you bring into reality. So this dibur, this speech, as the Chafetz Chaim said, there's a story, I think, that he was on a train. The Chafetz Chaim is this Hasidic master that each rebbe, each great rebbe, they're connected to one inyan that they brought down. So, of course, positive speech and judging favorably is already something that's out there in the world, that's taught from Judaism from the beginning till now as a very important principle. But some tzaddikim, some rabbis get the merit that this one inyan should be connected, and they're known for this one teaching, and everybody thinks of them. So the Chafetz Chaim, he's connected to Lashon Hara, but really Lashon Tov. So speaking positively instead of speaking negatively, and not saying anything negative about yourself or anybody else. And he started with focusing on anybody else. And he was on a train, and he asked this chassid, he asked this other, Jewish, pious, righteous person where he was going. And the person said he's going to see this righteous rabbi, the Chafetz Chaim. And the Chafetz Chaim, he doesn't know he's the Chafetz Chaim. There's no Instagram, there's no YouTube. So the Chafetz Chaim said, he's not so special. And this guy slapped him, and he said, if you only knew. And that was the lesson for the Chafetz Chaim, because he realized he was always focused on telling other people, never speak badly of others, because as you see, it colors how we view other people when we speak badly. You could change the reality, and that's all of this is about dibur. All of this is about speech. And we're literally in the parasha, in the time, in the energies of Bereishit, where God created the world through speech. So, as partners in creation, if we're using speech to speak badly of others, and we're coloring how other people perceive this person, how much more so are we coloring how this person perceives themselves? How are they going to come out of this space that we've placed them in? Melech David, in Tehillim, he actually says, when you see the wicked person, but you do the zamra, you do the itapcha, you flip it from bad to good, when you look back at this space that you've placed them in, that you're also placing yourself, because how can you try to hurt somebody without breaking your own vessel? How can you be in a negative space and have negative consciousness and darkness upon somebody else without having that affect you? So Melech David is saying, when you flip that, and you look back at that space that you've placed that person in through judgment and negativity, that you've also joined them in those moments, when you do the birur, the itapcha, and the zamra, which is sifting the good from the bad, which is singing the goodness into the darkness, which is flipping any darkness into good. When you look back at this space that you've placed them in through the judgment, through the speech, Melech David uses the word enena. They will no longer be there. That's the power of where we place somebody. And Dr. David Hawking, in his book Letting Go, he says the same thing. He says when we're doing this, we're forcing the person to take a complementary defensive position. Meaning we're placing them in this space, and only in the process that we spoke about, and as Dr. Hawkins talks about in letting go, can we release that tension from the world and remove that person from that space, as Melech David says, enena, and they will no longer be in that space that you've placed them in. That's the power of speech. That's what we're supposed to be understanding through the story of Adam Arishon, through Adam and Eve, through God as the creator, creating throughout the days leading up to Shabbat. And this is what we're supposed to bring into our own lives at all times. This tzedakah and this tzedek, this righteousness and this charity. Charity doesn't only have to be in the form of money. Money, as you see, when we're giving it to somebody poor, you can see that they light up. We're giving them hope. But this is also something we need to give ourselves. In this time of darkness, where we feel that there is no hope, what's the tzedakah that we're giving ourselves? What's the hope? Money, kesef, is just the mashal. It's just the way that we could understand this way in which we could bestow hope and help somebody out. But this is the thing that we need to do with ourselves at all times. And jumping back in to Yitgaber Kari and Sheyehu Morer HaShachar, so we're saying we have to proactively do this. And it has to be us that awakens the dawn, Shachar, the darkness. It has to be us that's bringing the good speech and the light, the day, the light, the sun, into this darkness, into the time where we don't see the light, into the nighttime where we can see the energies, and where we're getting pulled at night, we can reach the highest levels of connection and highest consciousness and elevated states. But that's also because so much of our evil inclination in the world may be up to disconnect and things that are not good, things that are pulling us away. As we know, there's the polarities even with love and how you can use relationships, love and sex. You can use it to literally mimic God in creation. We're in Bereishit and we're reading about that now. Or you could use it in a lustful way, in an animalistic way, which pulls you away from any connection. But as we're talking about how that affects the other person and how it affects you as well, you're pulling people away from their own divine connection. You're pulling people away from alignment because you're bringing darkness and you're distorting the emotion. The 7 emotional attributes, when we're thinking about chesed on the right and gvura, din, judgment, on the left, chesed is that loving kindness. So it's not that chesed and this side is all good and this other side of judgment and restraint is all bad. Of course, there is that middle, the tiferet, the harmony, but even within each emotional attribute in the sfirot, in the tree of life, we have to find the balance. So as we're saying with chesed, with loving kindness, we have to love the right things and act out of love in the right ways, not to distort that, not to use it for our own animalistic desires. And of course, when we're talking about the righteous forefathers, this is not a way to understand it in a regular way that we have limited understanding. But the Arizal says that there was an imbalance in the chesed, in the loving kindness of Avraham. And that's why Avraham has both Yitzchak and Ishmael. So Yitzchak is connected to the godly soul, to the good inclination, and Ishmael is connected to the opposite of that. And Rizal says because there was an imbalance in the chesed, in the overwhelming loving kindness that Avraham embodied. And it's not in a way for us to understand in the super negative way, it's in a spiritual sense. And that's why there was a disconnect, and these opposites, Yitzchak and Ishmael, that came from Avraham. And we see this again, the Arizal is pointing out, in Yitzchak, because Yitzchak brings Yaakov, brings Jacob, our forefather, that's representative of the good inclination, of that which is good, of godliness. And we even see it in the Gur Aryeh. It points out that even in the embryonic stage, we see it as their mothers walking toward a place of holiness, Yaakov is kicking and trying to get out. And when she's walking next to a place of idol worship, Esav is kicking to get out. And this is representative and embodied in all of us, because we all have the Yaakov, the good inclination, and the Esav, the bad inclination. And as we see, Yaakov is the perfection of the dichotomy of the forefathers that came before, of these different spiritual potentials. And that's why the 12 tribes come from Yaakov. And it's interesting because when you look and you think about Joseph being left in the pit by his brothers, who are a manifestation of the balance of the Tiferet, and no longer this disconnect coming from our forefather. Why did they leave him in the pit? Why did he get sold into slavery? So the way that we understand this is a few different ways. One, the brothers saw that there was this disconnect, this distortion of the emotions, or as the Arizal says, this imbalance of any one of the sfirot. In Avram's case, loving kindness, chesed. In Yitzchak's case, vula, deen, judgment, severity, restraint. So they thought, okay, it's still going like this, in this direction. So Yaakov is having his kids, the 12 tribes, and they saw Yosef with he has so much gaiva, he has so much pride, he's having these dreams. They didn't realize they're prophetic dreams. They thought, coat of many colors, people bowing down to him, all these different things, that this person is the other side. This person is Yishmael. This son, this brother, is Esav. So they thought they were doing something good by pushing him away. And when the situation arises that Yosef, that his dreams actually get him out of the darkest, mina metzach, of the darkest depths, where we see it's the truth, and the situation and the opportunity arises for revenge, something that, especially if you were stuck in jail for that period, you would be stirring in the desire to exact revenge to your brothers that put you there. How is it possible that he can go from the lowest space to second in command in this world, the Pharaoh, who's the ruler of the world, and he's second to that ruler? One, it's to teach us that there's always hope, and in the darkness and in the lowest space comes the greatest light. Yosef embodies, exemplifies, and comes to show us how true that is. And when he gets the opportunity to exact his revenge against his brothers, he plays out a scenario to see how they would act. And he saw that they did full teshuvah. What is teshuvah? What is repentance? How do we come back into alignment with our source? Teshuvah, when you break it down, is teshuv, return, and then the letter Hey, which is Gematria 5, which is the last letter in the Shem Havayah, in the Tetragrammaton, and the way that we understand Hashem, God, and how we try to connect to God. The first Yud, the second Hey, I'll pause. Those are representative of the upper levels and of God. The next Vav is the connector between the upper Hey and the lower Hey. We're the lower Hey. So Teshuvah is returning ourselves to the Vav that connects us to the Hey, that connects us to the Yud. Yud is Gematria 10, which in this Torah portion in the energies of this week parallel the utterances of creation, parallel the mirroring of creation that is our physicality and ourselves, because we're made up of the 10 sefirot of the tree of life, of these 10 different energies and potentials. So Yosef, when he tells them and he finally reveals himself to them, and they're so remorseful, which is the first stage of true teshuvah. The second stage is actually simcha and calling out and becoming a midaber that we're talking about. He explains and tells them that, and before we even jump into explaining this, you have to understand that when he's in jail, he does two things that give him extra years in jail. One is he tells the person, remember me. And two, he's saying, tell the person the dreams and don't forget me. So in some ways, we do have to do the ishtadlut. And of course, when we're thinking about the righteous, our forefathers, and the righteous on this level, we're not supposed to be seeing this as, oh, this is such a fault. No, we're supposed to see it as this is an example of something that we need to perfect within ourselves. So when he's saying this, it's a moment, an example of lack of emunah and full bitachon, where just in that moment, just like Moshe hits the rock, and it was the same thing. He had the ability, my middle name's Nevo, to go on Har Nevo and see the promised land, but he wasn't able to go in. And as we learn, anger causes a prophet to lose their prophecy, and a righteous person or a wise person to lose their wisdom. So in this case with Yosef, it was in that one moment and in those words, we keep talking about the dibur, the speech and the power of speech, that showed that there was an imbalance in his emunah, in his faith, and his bitachon, and his trust. And because of that, he was punished with more time in jail. Because Hashem is trying to say, I got you. Everything is happening as it should be. You're here for a reason. You're going to get out in the time, in the divine time, the ashkacha prati, that you should get out. And this is what I keep reminding myself, because my flights have been canceled. No other flights are going out. And yesterday at the same time that I get a text from Turkish Air that even the flight that I pushed off for the next day is also canceled, I got a message from El Al that the backup flight that I got for next week, which was 8-9 days away from when I was trying to go home, got moved up a couple days. And so I have to just trust and have the bitachon and emunah that time that I'm leaving, which is a little earlier than I initially received as an opportunity to buy from El Al, from the flight to going back to LA, is when I'm supposed to go back. So that's one thing. And he's also cluing into, look, you were in the dungeon, you were in the darkest depths by yourself as a Jew, sold into slavery, in the space, Mitzrayim, Meitzar means constriction, in the space of full constriction, of darkness, in the space of fear and anxiety. But from that space, you reach the highest level in that space, which is being the second in command to Pharaoh. And through that, as he tells his brothers, I don't even need to forgive you. You didn't even do anything wrong. Don't be so worried that I'm going to exact revenge. Because I was put here for a reason. And what was that reason? There were all these years of famine that he was able to predict through prophecy, through the dream, through interpreting the dream for Pharaoh. And he was saying, not only did that seemingly bad thing that you did against me save our family from famine, because we were able to send word to them and prepare the provisions, it saved the whole world. And this is the example when we read Ha'olam nivra bishvili, that the whole world is created for me. We see that in these stories that are not, I love this review of my book from Deepak Chopra, because it really explains what I'm trying to explain here. And I'm not as articulate as Deepak Chopra, so I'll read what he says. But when we had our discussion around Kabbalah on his channel, he says that this book series that I wrote in memory of my mom, Frida Levana Bat Shalom, and Yedida, that this book series shines the light on the Torah, not just being a spiritual book of historic tales, but of the stories that outline the archetypal states of consciousness within our own selves. So this is what we're trying to understand, that the world was created for me. It means that we are all a world in ourselves, which means that we could choose darkness, as you see with the evil and atrocities that are happening and that happen in the last bunch of days. And we could literally destroy everything that God built and brought in, and there was light and there was good, but there's also freedom of choice, and each person is their own world, so they could destroy everything. But as we see from Yosef, from the darkness coming toward the light, that there's also this potential for light, that we could also mimic Hashem creating, and we could also bring the goodness. And because each of us is a world, and as we see with Yosef, with interpreting the dreams and coming out of the darkness, coming second into command of Pharaoh, we could literally save the entire world. And that's what we need to understand, that Mitzrayim, Mitzar, constriction, fear, anxiety, despair, and darkness, Mitzrayim, the evil inclination, and Esav, that the good inclination, as he comes out, Yaakov, the good inclination, the godliness, is holding on to the Ekev, the heel of Esav. Esav represents Edom. We're still in the Roman exile. But Yaakov is trying to reach for the head, for the Rosh, and we're also doing that. We're also trying to go from, as Drake says, from the bottom, started at the bottom, now we're here, to the top, to reaching the Rosh, to going from Yaakov, Ekev, to Israel. Struggling through creation with God to reach the higher states of consciousness, to reach the redemptive state. This is the space that we all have to be in, especially now. Yigaber ka'ari, as we went on a lot of tangents, but Yigaber ka'ari in the Kutei Lachot, wake up like a lion, Sheyehu me'orer hashachar. That it should be you that awakens the dawn, hashachar, the darkness, that brings the light and goodness into the darkness. The amount of depth and sod and secret and truth that is in every line of Torah is seen even in this small little way through this video and this live that we're doing now. We're getting up to an hour or whatever. We've only covered one line. We have to realize the depth, the hope, and the light that exists in all of the Torah and all of the teachings. And as the Zohar says, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, the Torah and Hashem are one. And he goes further to say, and Bnei Israel. So when we connect to it, we become one with it, then we're connected to that part of us, the Nefesh Elokit, that is God, that we are mirroring godliness, that we are mirroring light and hope through connecting to the Torah, because it's all the same. That's what Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is saying in the Zohar, cluing us into that this is all oneness, this is all echad, right? So I might take a pause here and jump on in a bit, because this is a lot to process. But I'm praying that some of this can penetrate the souls of all of us, the global consciousness, a soul that keeps us one and not the goof that distances ourselves, the goof being physicality in the body. That we could, despite the darkness, not lose our hope and lead with goodness and love. And if we all do that and we can all mirror each other, then through that we can eradicate the darkness. Through that we could bring the redemptive consciousness and goodness. The time, the messianic era that's called Kulo Tov, where it's all goodness, Kulo Shabbat, where it's all rest and we don't have to toil like the sin of Adam for everything that we want and struggle with faith and trust. That Melech HaOlam, the King of the universe, God, our source, the Creator, is no longer Ne'elem, which is etymologically related to Olam, which means Ne'elem is hidden and Olam is the world. So we understand that the King of the world is hidden in the world to allow us free will. This seems to assume this contraction. But because of this, it means the King of the universe, our understanding of godliness, our ability to see and to feel godliness is also hidden. There's also concealment. So the redemptive consciousness is bringing the revelation in this concealment. And that's what we have to pray for now. So I pray for all Klal Yisrael and the whole world. And I pray that no matter what we're seeing and no matter what we're experiencing, we're able to still stay in the space of hope. As I mentioned, the lubavich Rebbe says not to fall into despair. Rebbenachman says not to fall into despair. But there can be bitterness. There can be remorse. But we have to flip it and do the itapcha to use the power in that bitterness to motivate us toward good. I love all of you guys so much. I'm praying for safety. I know that I have to be in Israel right now and I'm not able to get out for a reason. As Eliyahu Prayer says, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, and that's why I'm here. Because out of Israel, this Torah is disseminated. And that I'm in this space, that I'm with my brothers and sisters. Literally, physically, I'm always spiritually with them and with you guys, but I'm literally physically in this space. Yosef was in the darkness. Right now we're in Yisrael, so it's not the darkness, but right now there is darkness. So we have to flip it into light. We have to flip it into hope. We have to lead by example. And I pray that we could also figure out this situation. Of course, these people are the permutation of the evil inclination, and we have to eliminate that from the world. But after that, God willing, we will be successful. But there are going to be humans and souls that need us to lead with love and to be that light unto the nations. And we'll have to figure out how we can coexist and how we could deal with these people that are in these difficult situations. I was supposed to do an Israeli-Palestinian hip-hop showcase reconciliation show called the Hip Hop Solo, which I did not last time I was in Israel, but a long time ago at Levontin Sheva in Tel Aviv, and I was set to do that this Monday night. Of course, it got postponed or canceled. And I have a lot of friends that are here from all different backgrounds. But there are also people that are not in Israel, that want to be, that are in different areas that they have a lot of difficulty. And we have to pray for them. And we have to figure out how we can help them and pray that they have an inner revolution, that the people that are representing them and the billions of dollars that they're receiving are put toward good. And that they also, as we're talking about doing the tapcha, and despite all of the trauma and darkness that they're growing up with, the kids, that they could do their own inner biru, their own process of finding the good and finding the godliness within themselves and bringing the goodness into it, so that we have somebody to have peace with, that they have the inner revolution, that the people that they are elected or Hamas are not the ones that are representing them, which are the worst possible people for these people. It's hard for me to even use the Palestinian term for them and not us, because my mom's Palestinian. My mom's in the space that was Canaan, Israel, our holy temples are in. And then to minimize our being indigenous and our ancestral homeland, Jews being in Israel, the Romans renamed it to Palestina. But if you're going to use the word Palestinian in Palestine, if you want to be correct, really it's a Roman term and we should remove it. And in Hebrew it actually means invaders. It's not a really positive term anyway. But if you're going to use it, it should be used for both, for the Arabs that are in the land, the Arab Jews, the Arab Muslims, the Arab Christians. Being exclusively used for the ones that are not Israeli or Jewish, it's very misleading, and it causes so many problems. So my mom's not any less Palestinian than the people in the West Bank or Gaza. And these terms and these words are that which divide us. That's the problem. So when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about people and what region that they're in. The West Bank, Judea, Samaria, the space of the Yehud, the space of Judah, the space of the Jew. We've been, if you want to use ethnically cleansed, I mean, the Jews have been ethnically cleansed, or forced to ethnically cleanse themselves from these spaces. And obviously it's difficult. People go to war, people win, despite all odds. And despite that, give back land, and it becomes difficult. And what happens with the money and who they're backed by, Iran and all these different things. But if we keep looking at the past and blaming fingers, and we never get to move toward a future. I don't, of course, have the answers. But there is the pasuk from Melech David, who, our king, tied to these temples, tied to the time where godliness was revealed and Jews were in Yerushalayim with the Beit HaMikdash, their holy temple. It says, Esayanai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. I set my sights to the mountains. And it's a question, where will my salvation come from? But really it's the answer. He's saying that when we feel that we're in the darkness, and when we feel that even being present, which usually is a good thing, but if we're being present in constriction and fear and anxiety, then he's suggesting, Esa enai el harim. Set your sights toward the mountains, toward the future, realizing that ultimately if we could zoom out, or if we could skip to the future, then we'll see everything is for the best. And we'll be able to go into this space of hope. And that is what will bring the best now. That will manifest as we read in this parasha. Let there be light. And it was good. That's how we bring that in. And it's not a question, where will my salvation come from? Ayin. Ayin is nothingness. Yesh me'ayin, yesh me'yesh. Yesh me'ayin is ex nihilo. It's creation or somethingness out of nothingness. for us to understand it, it's also the bitul, it's ayin, it's nothingness, it's self-nullification. It's the space in which we remove our judgments and are trying to understand that which we cannot understand. And Melech David is saying from that process is how... I have a block on my Instagram, so it's just blocked. I'm back. So I was saying from that, from that suspension of judgments, is where the help is going to come from, is where the salvation itself is going to come from. So that's what we have to do. We have to be in the space of hope, pray for the healing, usher in the healing by being in the space of hope, of goodness, of light, of love, of echad, of avav. And we'll bring in the law of attraction, we'll bring in the goodness somehow. We have to pray for our soldiers. And as we know from the Torah, there's always the ones that are at battle, in physicality. And then there's the ones that are at spiritual battle, that when we read the Tehillim, the Psalms from Melech David, we're reading that he's fighting all these different powers and people that are coming against him, trying to take him out. We have to understand that in our own lives for also the people, but the evil inclination and all of the things, the fear, the anxiety that we're speaking of, and the darkness that's trying to take us out and putting us in this shena, in this spiritual slumber. And we have to do this bi'ur in the Zamra, the Melech David, the King David is always doing, to bring in the goodness. So I pray that we can all have the strength and the resolve to do this. We have to pray for our soldiers. We also have to be spiritual activists in prayer, in moving ourselves from the silence, from the domem to the dibur, to the midaber, moving from our animalistic nature and that which tries to pull us in that direction, to the elevated space, to the spirit, to the space of the midaber that can mimic creation, that can actually manifest goodness and bring light into this darkness, and that is through speech. So I pray that we all have the kavanot, have the intention and the connection, the elevated alignment in the prayers that we're saying, and that we say the Psalms, because you have no idea the power of Psalms. I'm working on this Tikkun HaKlali, which rebbenachman brought into the world 10 Psalms that mimic the 10 utterances and the tree of life, which is the 10 tefillot, and the 10 mekomot, how we mirror God's creation and God himself. That we continuously say these Psalms so that we could bring in the light and the redemption now. Thank you so much. Love you guys so much.